Okay, Project Mercury being positioned as the UK's first family of sovereign frontier models. What does sovereign AI truly
Yeah.
mean in practice, and why does the UK need it now, maybe more than ever?
So yeah, happy to take that first. So there's been quite a lot of talk on this idea of sovereignty and AI sovereignty. And our side is it's more than just the location of a data center. It's more fundamental than that. It's all about control. Can someone turn it off at any given time? Who has control under the own model weights? So one example is, ChatGPT has been shown to have specific opinions on who you should vote for in the next UK general election. So it really goes much more to the heart on the models themselves as well as what happens to data. And we've now seen kind of the overreach that the US government, as an example, has using kind of US tech companies as a way of interacting and engaging with other governments such as the UK. So kind of we believe sovereignty is being able to have control over the entire model stack from, GPUs to the data centers to the models and then also to the application layer themselves. And really now it is a problem that is becoming worse and worse as we've now kind of seen this new geopolitical tension and shift that we're now seeing, where it's really important that the UK, if it wants to have any say in this new technology that's just changed work, if it wants to have a say in what actually happens, it needs that form of control and sovereignty.
And I believe that the description you've come up with is that UK, or to summarize what's been going on, is that the UK's been a digital tenant for the past decade. So it'd be good to understand how Project Mercury is changing that dynamic and shifting the country towards genuine digital autonomy, which I guess, as you sort of explained already, is increasingly important for us.
Mark, do you want to take that one, or I'm happy to?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, because it was model specific, I wondered if you should take that. But yeah, I mean, we share 100% the same values and beliefs that James do. Civo is the infrastructure provider. We provide the data centers, we provide the GPUs, the infrastructure, the networks, everything. And when with this partnership, I've been talking about sovereignty now for over 3 years. Before everyone else was talking about it, obviously more recently everyone's talking about it, and there's a lot of sovereignty washing as well and claims by people. But when Locai approached us, it was very pleasing because two UK founded companies that want to do the right thing by the UK and deliver true sovereign service. And I think the UK deserves to have that in place. And people want that. We've done a lot of surveys around that, and people are increasingly concerned about geopolitical risks and access to data. So to have that Project Mercury on UK soil, two UK companies working together on that is, I think, very important.
Okay, and the pair of you, so like Locai Labs, Civo, you're building and hosting the models entirely on UK soil. So what would have been, or what are the biggest technical and infrastructural challenges in terms of creating homegrown frontier level LLMs?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, the main bottleneck that we were encountering was compute. There is currently a lot of understanding that to train up these, huge models, there needs to be the compute to be able to do that. And with obviously issues regarding the grid, we initially were thinking that is not going to be possible, but it was actually by working and collaborating with Civo, and Mark can speak more to kind of the work in which the Civo is doing to be able to spin up data centers and GPUs that we can do the necessary pre-training work and post-training work. But interestingly, now is a really good time to do it rather than 2, 3 years ago, as there has been a dramatic improvement in the kind of GPUs now available, from NVIDIA as an example, where the compute that you need to train a 30 billion parameter model or a 250 billion parameter model is significantly smaller due to kind of new recent innovations innovations in both chip design, but also new architectures with, for instance, like mixture of experts, language models, so on and so forth. So we now think now is actually a very good time to get into the game and be training these models here in the UK.
And in terms of the coverage, I think you hinted at it there, but the series is spanning sort of everything from edge to the frontier systems. Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to how you see enterprises and I guess the public sector as well using these different tiers of capability. I mean, I guess LLMs are today, but whether inferencing is something that you think will become more prevalent over time. Just your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, one thing at the moment in which we can never compete at the scale of either the US or China, which is why the belief up until now has been that the UK cannot engage in the model layer. It very much needs to resign itself to only the application layer. And we kind of think, we shouldn't be competing on the 1 to 5 trillion parameter scale. We should be competing, though, on smaller domain-specific models. So if you look at, for instance, ChatGPT or Claude, these are huge, enormous models that are really meant to serve more of a consumer base than anything, where they're really trying to fill it with as much knowledge as possible and try and please all sorts of different domains. But if you actually train a model specifically for a domain, such as the finance, healthcare, so on and so forth, you can actually have a model that is far smaller and cheaper to train, but actually surpasses that in terms of performance on those key tasks. So the reason why we're kind of specifically working on those 30 billion to 250 billion parameter size is because that's kind of the now performance size that you can get, where if you then add in new domain specific information, such as training on your actual code base, you can actually be hitting the levels that you would be expecting from an Anthropic level model and actually surpass it by focusing that model specifically on what you do as a business. And you can then also have the size of these models, since they're a lot smaller, you don't necessarily need to host them in a data center. So one of the issues, obviously the UK being limited on compute, is not just training, but also the problem of inference, that the more users you have, the more GPUs and compute you need to have to serve it. But by focusing on a more 30 billion to 250 billion parameter range, that also then unlocks being able to deploy those series of models, not just necessarily on one huge GPU set, but actually you can start to move things towards in the actual building of your office, all the way down to 30 billion parameter model can actually run on your own laptop. So by focusing on these domain specific models that can then also be hosted in the walls of an enterprise, that is when you can have essentially complete sovereignty and control, because we're not just building models for the UK as a nation, we're building models for individual enterprises that you in itself own your own intelligence.
Okay, and in terms of the proposition, I mean, we might have covered some of this already, but security, residency, and compliance are pretty much central to the proposition. So just and we've talked a little bit about geopolitics. So in terms of the sovereign model family, reducing that geopolitical risk compared to relying on foreign-owned hyperscale providers, how significant, I suppose, is it, and how what sort of response do you think you will be getting, or you have already received?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the problem you've got right now is that there's confusion around what sovereignty actually means, and the hyperscalers will have you think one thing, the US companies, and the reality is obviously, I'm sure, very different. And so some people define it as where the data center is located, which the hyperscalers will have you think, and then it comes down to things like legal jurisdiction. It comes down to where the company's owned. It could come down to where employees are based and who has access to that data. And there's the whole raft of things. And the problem we've got in the industry is no one's come up with an official definition, and that makes it very difficult to pin down exactly where sovereignty sits with people. But like said, I think for us, it's really important about this, almost like the digital kill switch. And if there can be any foreign interference and data can be moved out or anything can happen, then we don't believe it's sovereign. And so, two UK companies under UK jurisdiction with UK owned data centers, with all the infrastructure being hosted in the UK, is pretty much as sovereign as you can get. Now, you can go even further if you want and talk about where the chips are coming from, and we all know that they're made, in Taiwan, and they're American. But it's how far do you go? There's only a certain level, and I don't think anyone in the world can actually claim sovereignty all the way through to the hardware, to the chip, to the memory, to the supply chain that has, and that's where companies have to decide themselves as well, is what are the risks to their business, and where they see sovereignty as important to them.
And in terms of the government's contribution here, I think there's a £500 million sovereign AI fund that's designed to accelerate domestic AI development, and these AI growth zones in particular, I guess. How does Project Mercury align with that national strategy, and what's the role you see it playing in terms of Britain and the UK's long-term AI independence? And bearing in mind what you've just said, how independent can it truly become, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Sovereign AI Fund and Unit is, really, really great that that is now being done and really sort of fostering more kind of the UK startup scene. As we're now actually seeing, quite a few different UK startups, all the way from both, model layer to application layer, and also even now onto the hardware layer, popping up and getting that level of support, which is really, really important. Fundamentally, I do think though we're kind of at the start. One big problem that we still need to crack is the problem of procurement, where, right now it is very easy, in the UK government, and as an example, to just continue using Microsoft Copilot or AWS, so on and so forth. But really, we need to start taking more of a long-term horizon approach, that if we really want to support the UK economy and growth of these UK startups, you need to actually start taking a chance on the little guys and working more with them as a lever, where you can end up having those challenges of those hyperscalers, so on and so forth. But it's really cracking that issue of procurement, which, fantastic. The sovereign AI is starting to unlock more on the investment side, but still, more work obviously needs to be done. I think also fundamentally, as a nation, we need to be more confident that we can build, really great business technology here in the UK. I think one of the reasons why there hasn't been a Mistral or OpenAI equivalent here in the UK, one, you can put it aside to the problem of compute. But I think also it's important that we need to kind of have that belief that we can do this, we can build another DeepMind equivalent. And we need to kind of back those really innovative startups, really trying to challenge the status quo and make a huge impact, which can therefore boost the UK economy as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, the suggestion, sort of talking to folks in the data center industry and more wider IT space, is that the UK has the opportunity to, after the US and I guess China, to become the sort of third AI player. Do you think that's a realistic ambition, or for some of the reasons you've described, is it going to be difficult to get there ahead of anybody else that might be trying to achieve similar sort of status?
I think that the UK is in a really fantastic position actually right now, even though, not necessarily having our own Anthropic equivalent yet. It is one, because kind of when you look at AI, it really is now heading towards this idea of trust. Do you, as an individual, as a government, as an enterprise, actually trust this new AI system that we're utilizing? And the UK very much has a reputation for taking a bit more of a measured approach to things. And when that comes to things like enterprise AI, that is actually going to be really crucial, because, for instance, doing an API call to a Chinese model hosted in China, although open source, there are obviously concerns over things like backdoors, as an example. But then if you also look to the US and what happened early this year with the Grok image generation issue, that also raises concerns there, where the UK has a great sense of, having that amazing talent in terms of kind of the research scene, where I mean we're the top third number of AI research papers coming out from the UK. That we're actually very well placed now that the industry is starting to mature a bit more from maybe the previous experimental phase over the last 2, 3 years, to actually be a really great place to run a company and deliver these more trusted AI solutions at scale.
And in terms of just sort of back to the project itself, I know you've committed to training the models using 100% renewable energy. Just your thoughts as to how important is sustainability in the race to build this sort of frontier level AI, and what it means more generally for the UK's green technology ambitions, I guess, particularly in, we're getting, I won't say pushback, but, there are a lot of different opinions at the moment as to, sort of how important sustainability is versus this sort of AI race. Suggestions that the two may not be completely compatible. Just be fascinated to know your sort of take on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult one because on one hand we want to build, every country wants to build their technology and improve, and there is this AI race, if you like, and it's trying to get that balance right, because if we need to build right now with the access to the grid, there's very limited capacity available, and that starts to have companies look at other alternative options and behind the meter options, which might be gas, and there are some great projects as well around biomethane, which is considered renewable, and some other solar projects and things like that. But it's trying to get that balance, and the government's got an interesting job in that, because if we don't build quick enough, then we'll fall behind. And it's whether there's a relaxation of the views on renewables. But certainly from a Civo and a Locai perspective, we are doing it on renewables, and we have got access to 100% renewables. But it just be in the future as we grow out for this, the whole of the UK has a huge need for compute. Will we always be able to get access to renewables for everyday centre that we build will be, but that's not just down to us, that's just down to the availability of what we can get our hands on.
And the suggestion longer term is maybe that these SMRs will sort of come to the rescue is perhaps the wrong description, but maybe be the place where people end up. Is that something, a sort of view you would share? I know they're sort of 5 to 10 years out potentially, but you see them as being a sort of sustainable solution in the longer term.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to talk about those, and it's a different view. Obviously, they're not strictly speaking 100% renewable, in that way, but obviously very low carbon options. So yeah, I think that they may be a pathway, and there's some hydrogen technologies as well that are coming and things like that. So certainly there could be some interesting options coming down the line. They could be a very big option for everyone, not just in the UK but globally. And the US has got the same problem. We often think in the US, they've got access to lots of land, lots of power, but we do a lot of work in the US, and it's very hard to even get data into capacity in the US right now. So there's generally a problem with the grids across the world, problem in Europe as well, in mainland Europe and places that have got issues. So I think as globally, we're going to have to start looking at innovative new ways, new solutions, SMRs and things like that as well, definitely.
And maybe just to look ahead a little bit, your thoughts. I don't know if you set yourself specific objectives and timelines, or just a sort of general idea of what you want to do. So, yeah, what does success look like for Project Mercury, and the impact you think you may well have on public sector, private enterprises, and the sort of digital ecosystem more generally? Just thoughts.
Yeah, so where we on a technical model front, we want to obviously build these kind of pre-trained variants from 30 billion parameters up to 250 billion parameters. In terms of like timelines to achieving this, this isn't a 5-year long project. This is more, sub 2 years to be able to achieve all those different model ranges. And then once we've built up models, it would then, these base like pre-trained variants, we would then be specializing them across different domains that are, crucial to the UK economy. So one being, for instance, the finance sector, so a finance variant, a healthcare variant, so on and so forth, which we would then like to see deployed, across these different industries. One part we're also working on, not just on the pre-training side with Civo GPUs, is we're also working with Civo and those GPUs for our research in this aspect of continual learning. So that's the ability for models to essentially learn over time based on real usage. So one example, it would be deploying a model in a finance business, which through use of that model is collecting new information on the finance industry, which is then used as new training signals to make that better. So where we want to see that is these models being deployed across industries, improving and getting better over time for an individual enterprise, where they just have these domain-specific models where they own the weights and their data and are able to essentially use AI in their business without going out and needing to do third-party API calls to these more generic models out there. In regards to public sector, we also then want to see those same models being deployed within the public sector and making a difference there. One thing you can do when pre-training these models is also pre-training, for instance, a model for the NHS as an example, where the importance of pre-training really comes into the limelight there, because you would have complete control over the data that you have trained into it. So, one big issue, for instance, is this point on copyrighted data and copyrighted material. By us having control from the model and building up, one, we can have control over the data, but you can also design the architecture so it's built in a way that works very well with that continual learning aspect that I just talked about.
I'm also wondering, just an extra thought occurs. Clearly, you're looking to augment and partly replace, I suppose, these hyperscalers, because as you say, you're not competing at the largest level, but you're going to make it. Do you think that disruption will have any impact on them? Because clearly they, that I think you alluded to earlier, they own so much sort of infrastructure at the moment in the UK, they potentially could cause trouble if they wish to do so. Does that concern you at all, at least in the short term, that they could kind of, take their toys away and cause major disruption, or do you think they will be accepting and understanding of the reasons behind this sort of sovereignty and be content with their chat GPTs and etc., and not worried so much about what they might be losing? I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I think the hyperscalers, have got a place as well, and they're obviously very good at what they do. They've a lot of money, and currently, some of the best models in the world. And the UK needs the hyperscalers, needs these companies to, there's lots of businesses need AI now. They need the ability to do that. Lots of consumers want to use AI, and we're only just really touching the surface at the moment of what's to come as we move into humanoid robots and all the things that we've got to come in the future on around smart cities and smart homes and those kind of things. And in all honesty, we as the UK or other UK founded companies, we don't have the resources right now. But I think over time, what we're saying is, especially with government, is that we want government to back challenges. I know there's good news with the AI Sovereign Fund, and there are lots of interesting startups, and we start to gradually build up our own UK-based ecosystem. And then it comes down to choice. It's everyone has a choice, and there might be some regulated industries that things change, and it has to be true UK sovereign. And there'll be others where they're not regulated, and they have that choice of using an American or a Chinese or a UK model or data center, and that's their choice. And I think that's the bit that's important for me, is that if we get the transparency in what sovereignty actually means and everyone's honest about it, then each company or organization can evaluate the risks themselves, and then apply their own business plan to that of where they deploy things, and how they deploy things, and what models they use. So it's going to take time, and obviously we've got to prove that there's some really strong alternative options. we are on the brink of doing that with Project Mercury and the work that we're doing with Locai. So we're excited about that future, and hopefully people will see the benefits of that. And I think, James, you might want to mention about a client that you're already working with, because they absolutely insisted that it has to be UK model. It had to be private as well, so it couldn't be on the public cloud. And I think there's going to be more and more examples as we move forward of companies like that that insist on UK, true UK sovereignty.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Mark. I mean, one client that we're working with, they're called First Light Fusion. They're one of the two nuclear fusion companies in the UK. And, their issue, they're dealing with incredibly sensitive data and obviously very nervous using kind of models, whether it's any third-party API calls. So what we were able to do with them is build their own coding model that is now running on their own air-gapped network, which is now collecting training data for them based on the kind of the coding that they do, which is then acting as new training signals to then update and improve the model. So we're kind of seeing where this partnership and project, Mercury really shines are those regulated industries who are taking a pause around using AI right now and thinking, is happening to my data, what is happening in terms of intellectual property, and also things like token pricing. Most recently, Anthropic again increased their price on their API, which is also causing a lot of concern from knowing how much is this actually going to cost in the long term. So by being able to provide companies with the option now to use AI safely within the walls of their enterprise, whilst also having now an option of not necessarily just a Chinese or American model, but a British model, aligned specifically on the UK healthcare system or the UK legal system, as an example, is now kind of a great opportunity that we're really excited to unlock.
And so I keep thinking of final questions. I promise this is the
No,
last
no,
one.
please,
Uh,
please.
Just in terms of the capacity, I mean, assuming things go well, which there's no reason to think not, uh, are you comfortable? We all know the data center industry is under pressure for power, land, and all that, as I think mentioned earlier. Are you comfortable that there is enough space and power, etc., to grow the business alongside the customer demand, or do you worry that, as with all data centers at the moment, there's some sort of threat that there might be a bit of a bottleneck or just a lack of capacity at some stage?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge for everyone, even for the large. Look at Anthropic. They were recently, throttling a lot of customers. That's probably why they're putting their prices up as well now. And that was because they didn't make enough investment into data center capacity. And in the end, they did a deal with Elon Musk, and they took the Colossus One off Elon Musk and have rented that at some crazy price. And that got them some capacity at the moment that's allowing them to grow. So it's not just a challenge that say the challengers are facing. And I think anyone that's successful in this industry is going to face some challenges in being able to stand up infrastructure, both from the data center side, but also from even the the chip side and making sure you've got a regular supply of chips coming through. And obviously they're very, very expensive, so that it's going to need capital. Fortunately, Civo, we've got a certain amount of capacity that certainly for right now is ample for the work that we're doing with Locai. We've already got our orders in with NVIDIA for the new Vera Rubin generation, so that will unlock additional performance and actually lower the cost of the training as well in that regard. So they'll be shipping in Q1 next year. So we feel we're well positioned, but like everyone, it's going to be a challenge, and you can be almost a victim of your own success, because the more successful you are, the more
Yeah.
data center capacity that we'll need. But hopefully that if you're successful, it makes it easier to get capital. And if you get the capital, then we can invest into more data centers as well. So, but we feel we're in a good place right now.
Fantastic. I mean, it's been great to chat to you both, and thanks so much for sharing so many great insights into the work that you're doing and the likely future for AI in the UK. So, Mark and James, thanks so much.